Well, welcome into episode 1, the first ever The Point After podcast on the Oklahoma Sports Network. I'm your host, Eric Sharam, and before we get to all the nuts and bolts of why we're here, let's first off talk about the word podcast. That was new to me. Podcasting. I know it's a phenomenon. Everybody is doing a podcast, so why don't we, right? On the Oklahoma Sports Network, give it a try. Because I have a radio background. I started I had to count 40 years ago, 1984. I was a junior in high school in a small community radio station that went off the air at 11 o'clock at night. And they hired high school students on the weekends to do radio. And we were experienced with some of the guys that knew better that could kind of train us. And so they recommended that after I graduated high school, if I was going to continue on that career, to go to broadcasting school. And most of those guys at the radio station went to Brown Institute, which was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I went there, 9-month program, got my certificate, and then job hunted. And Lawton, Oklahoma found me via the phone, was hired by the phone off of a cassette deck, believe it or not. What can this guy do? And so I was hired and come down and started working. And I thought, well, maybe, it's not being familiar with the area, that maybe I'd be here a year or two, and then I would actually go somewhere else, back home, back up north. That didn't happen. I stayed here, got married, had kids, and loved every minute of it. And I'll tell you what, of doing broadcasting and radio for all those years, there wasn't a day that I woke up like I had friends and I have family members that could not stand their job, couldn't wait to go home, that I loved it. You get to meet new people all the time. You just had, every day was a little different. And I like that. And I like the communication part. So this podcasting thing was relatively new to me, just as streaming is, that I had to change on the Oklahoma Sports Network. That was 8 years ago. So we'll talk to you a little bit about how that took place. So what happened was about 40 years of doing radio, and then I would do play-by-play for some sports, and we did football, and I did some basketball and some wrestling and some other things. We got in the press box, and one football game, there was a crew that was just bringing in all kinds of equipment, stands and cameras and computers, and I said, what on earth is going on here? And the guy was nice enough to stop by and say, if you aren't doing this, then you're totally missing out. I said, okay, well, I'm well into where change can be good. It wasn't always like that. In fact, when you went to vinyl and then you went to carts and CDs and then you went all computerized, I was the one that was the holdback to, no, we want to still do things the old way of radio. But I knew embracing this new technology may not be a bad thing. So the guy said, okay, contact me at the end of the season and we'll talk. So he brings us up and shows us the layout. And I said, okay, that's not too bad. But, the seeing the game, and this is what I liked this is what's so fascinating about our streaming, to connect to people and to connect people that cannot go to a game. It's not that they're choosing not to go. Could be moms, dads, grandmas, aunts and uncles, people that are out of state relative wise. And then our connection to our 13 schools, at least 10 of them have military connections. So you have Lawton Fort Sill, the Army base there, and the surrounding communities of Cache and Elgin. And then you have Altus with their Air Force base and Middle with their Air Force base. You've got a huge military following. And how many times have we heard back from those individuals? I love it. We get an email from Germany. I love seeing my daughter play softball because I'm stationed over here and I could not see. We had a team that we did not cover, Snyder. We did a playoff football game for them one year. And we get an email from a guy from Guantanamo Bay who's stationed there and said, I get to see all my alma mater play. How exciting is that? So to connect, and that's what the WWW stood for, is the World Wide Web. We are everywhere across a streaming platform. Now, that was my other thing. I was just like podcast was new to me. Streaming. take you back to 8 years ago when we say the word streaming to potential advertisers, and we thank the people that really got on board in the very early stages of this, because we had to explain kind of what a concept of this was going to be. You know, this is what we hope it to be. You can go to see it and see it live. So that was new, but when we said streaming, that was not a household word. They didn't know what streaming was. What is that? Is that like a live radio broadcast on the internet that you can listen to? No, you get to watch it like on my TV sets. And the other thing that we had to tell people to do in the early on stages of doing this, because we weren't app friendly as we are now. Well, how can I get it on my home TV? Well, what we said was you have to get an HDMI cord. We literally had to tell people this. Go to your laptop, get an HDMI cord, plug it from your laptop into your TV, and you'll be able to watch. This was 8 years ago. Just like explaining an iPhone 8 years ago would have been a little difficult for people to understand. So we did that for a while until, we got on an app, and 62% of those still watch us on an app, which we're so thankful for. So if you're on an Apple or Android device, just search the Oklahoma Sports Network. It's free to download and free to watch. That's easy, simple. So we love that, and people love they can watch on the go. And then they informed us a little bit about some technology that I was not familiar with. Granted, about 7-8 years ago, I had to get schooled by my sons who told me a little bit about it because they knew about it. They said, well, you may want to start thinking about being on the platform of Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, and Apple TV. Roku, what is that? What is a Roku? Well, I have a Roku at home. We got a couple of Fire Sticks. I'm not on Apple TV, but got Apple products and everything else that we do. So we're in people's homes. Over 28,000 downloads in homes of individuals that are on the Roku and Amazon Fire Stick and Apple TV. And then if you have a smart TV, then you can still use your phone and then send it to a phone without having those devices as well. So as people were cutting cable and getting rid of satellite, we were still viable, and we still are. And amazed after 8 years working into our 9th season with 13 schools. And we're so thankful to have them. And if you're a school or a school out there that's wanting to find a platform like ours that they can have a landing page. And what I like about it is when you're on the phone and I have my phone here, but when you click on it, all of the games are there under our app through the 13 schools. So if you're in Mid-Del and you want to watch Carl Albert, then you want to watch how Del City's doing, or Midwest City, whichever, or any of the Lawton schools, you can do the same thing. You can do that without having to back out, go to your Safari search, find out a YouTube page or a Facebook page or the school landing page. We're right there. And so back to the start was in the Lawton Fort Sill community. We took 2 of the 3 schools and then eventually got the 3rd. So 3 Lawton schools, Cache, Elgin, Altus, Walters, Newcastle, and the 3 Mid-Del schools, Midwest City, Del City, and Carl Albert. I can't announce yet, but we already have another school on board for this year to make it 13. And then we have another channel, which is called OSN 1, just kind of like ESPN 2 or something else like that. We had to have a channel set up for if you were not a school of ours full-time, but you wanted us to do like a game of the week for basketball or football. And then we had other entities reach out, like we have SNU, we have rugby, college rugby in the fall. And we have a group out of Edmond that does roller derby. We've done a cornhole tournament. Now, we always like the fact, and I love our name. I think we're so fortunate to have the name that we do because we cover the whole state of Oklahoma without being regionalized at all. The Oklahoma Sports Network. And sports is our middle name. So we love what we do. We love to continue what we're doing. And what I liked, there's been times in my life, I was a realtor for a brief moment and I had a real estate license. And when I got my license, I remember they're saying, oh man, you just missed out on the biggest payoff. The 2-3 years leading up to this was huge. And then there was the fallout. And then, you're in that fallout time and the rebuilding. I said, I just missed it. So when I got on board with this, when I just educated you about streaming not being a household word, and then Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV didn't exist, and we had to tell people to use an HDMI cord off of your laptop, we've come a long way, baby, and we are not plateaued yet. That's what I love about this, that we are not stagnant, that we have to reinvent ourselves like some other media forms are trying to have to do. And what I love too, not only being on the phone and on the home devices, but we are very aggressive in all of our social media platforms too. And the reason being is we go to where you live. So if you're a Facebooker and that's what you do is you're on Facebook, we reach you there. Maybe you're on Instagram. Okay. Maybe you're on X, formerly known as Twitter. Okay. We got you covered. So Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, as long as they still remain TikTok. And then YouTube. And YouTube was another an eye-opening. And when we started this, I thought, okay, this is something we can do on the weekends, but it just blew up more and more. And it just had needed more and more attention, just like why I'm coming to you now in podcast form. So you get to those points and you go, okay, well, we just keep growing and you keep moving along. And YouTube, I always thought, well, it was an afterthought. I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just get these live streams of games and then upload it to YouTube some other time. Well, I found uploading a 3-hour plus football game for just one school took a lot of time. I said, that isn't working. So 2 years ago, we went live on YouTube and boy, that exploded. And mainly males 18 to 24. And that's where they lived. So I said, okay, where do a lot of males live? Well, they live on YouTube. My son has the YouTube channel, one of them with his wife, as a subscription. And then the NFL came up and YouTube. And now they're going to stream certain things that you have to belong to those platforms to watch. Now, we're fortunately not doing that in most cases. We're still free to download and free to watch with no subscription needed. Don't have to pay. Love that. As long as we get advertising support. And we're going to continue to do that. So this podcast is just, this first one was an introduction of who I was, what experience I brought in broadcasting, to what the company is, where it's going, and where we can plan to keep taking it from here. And it's upward. I mean, you know, we're regionalized. I saw the communities we're in, Southwest Oklahoma, some of the metro. Yes. Is Tulsa? Yes. Oh, and then I missed another portion that is taken care of for us is Bravado. We have a connection with Bravado TV, and Bravado, a wireless provider in Southeast Oklahoma, provides a lot of content for football games for us in that part of the state. So give us time and we'll get the panhandle, and then we'll have the whole domination of the state of Oklahoma with OSN involved in it, the Oklahoma Sports Network. We got some other ideas in the works. We got a mobile studio that's going to be going out for football games to go to communities that we normally don't have relationships with and maybe do games of the week. We are going to, with this podcast, highlight all of our teams, of course. We'll talk with coaches. We'll talk with players. And I'm sure you're very overjoyed to know that, no, you're not going to have to sit and listen to me the entire time, because guests, that's what it's all about, having guests and involving ourselves in the community in which we live to make this great state even greater and really taking it to another level, you know? And so being comfortable to being where people live on all those social media platforms to inform them about what we do. In fact, you know, our website is really kind of a landing page for Google searchers. I say that because we encourage so many people like yourself to please download our apps so you'll have them. Like us and follow us on all those platforms, because then you'll know what we have next. Well, are you doing this soccer matchup? Are you doing baseball? Are you doing football? Are you doing this game, that game? We get calls all the time about those kind of things. And so if you connect to it already, then you know that. So a Google search will find the Oklahoma Sports Network, our website, oksportsnet.com. That's easy to find, but we're still searched. The top 2 or 3 searches from Google every month is always OSN or the Oklahoma Sports Network. So that means our name is getting out there. Do I think that we're a household name? By no means. And the other thing is too, with high school sports, guess what? It's always going to be evolving and changing, because the kids that were in grade school 8 years ago now are in middle school and high school, and now they're a part of the Oklahoma Sports Network. And one other thing that I must highlight and must tell you is that the kids are the stars. And even though I've got a broadcasting degree and career, and I told you all about that, I never forget why we're doing it, who we're doing it for, you know, with the parents and the people that can't make it to games, and who their stars are. It's not the guys behind the mic calling the game. Yes, it's fun. We love to do it. There's a lot of guys, you know, we get energetic, we get excited, maybe a little bit too excited at times, maybe a little bit too involved in a sports sometimes, but that's what sports is. But we never forget. We never forget the most important part of this, is who the stars are. And then secondary, you know, we're just kind of fill-ins. I tell our guys when we train, when we first come to the Oklahoma Sports Network, I said, I always kind of ask them this, you know, in kind of a meeting. I said, we have a 4-person crew for football. You have a producer. They kind of do all the ins and outs, commercials, all the bells and whistles that go in between a broadcast. Then we have a camera person. We have a play-by-play guy and a color commentator. Now, back in the days of radio, you had 2 people. That was it. The producer was back at the radio station, and 2 people would cover it. And it was you and your color analyst. And I always thought color analysts were always the toughest job of them all. But I was the play-by-play guy and the color analyst, so I was the star, you know. People were sitting on the edge of the seat for every word that I had to say so I could paint the picture of the game. And radio still has a little bit of flair like that. Like Toby Rowland for the University of Oklahoma. If you don't get to see a game, you get to hear it or see it through Toby's eyes. And that's helpful sometimes when I'm on the road and I have to do that. But the other thing is with streaming, it's a little different, or just like TV, because we all see it. We don't have to be told what it is. We don't have to be described what it is. We actually see what it is. And that's the exciting fact of that. And so then I set these people down and I say, okay, now who do you think of this 4-person crew, who do you think is the most crucial? Who is the number 1 position of this crew? And a lot of them are silent and they don't really want to say. And some of them semi get it right, but it always boils down to the camera person, camera operator. Because without them, without seeing it, we miss it. And so, yes, it's nice to have a good play-by-play guy, but I want to see it because that's what they're doing is they're watching. Case in point, early on, and you know, spoil any names, but there was a team that had someone on camera that was a loyal fan. And they were into the game. And this was at the end of the 4th quarter. And this team that we were covering had to make a touchdown and they had to make a 2-point conversion. So there was some things they had to do. So our game was done and we were watching it. And I remember that big play that you heard the announcers calling and the ball is in the air and the camera stops because the camera person is cheering because he sees it with his natural eye that it's a caught touchdown. But we as a viewing audience, and you talk about being livid, not only as a viewer, but as someone that manages this. What do I do in the real time moment? We just missed the touch. We heard the guys call it, but we tell that story because all the viewers didn't get to see it. They heard it, but they didn't see it. And then secondly, to add insult to misery, the second part of that was the 2-point conversion, which was also missed because the person behind the camera was cheering when they saw in the natural eye that it was caught. We heard that it was caught, but we never saw it. And we never get that back. So I really emphasized going for, and that was about 7 years ago. And so since then, knock on wood, that has not happened. I don't want it to happen. So we stress that even though you think you're the guy that, and it was always a humbling experience because I remember the late Bob Berry, we were at a little radio conference back in OAB and they were having a conference for sports broadcasting and some tips and pointers. And Bob Berry was the guest speaker. And he was talking about not getting so full of yourself. And he talked about getting the right color guy that's not going to repeat everything that you just said. So they don't really add any analysis on it. They're just repeating exactly what you just said. And that was always kind of funny. But he always told us, and this kind of humbled me and it brought me down to earth, even back in the radio stuff. He says, people are not on the edge of their seat listening to every word you say. Unfortunately, he said they're in and out of a ball game. All they want to know, what's the score? You're probably saying it with me. And how much time is left? The most 2 important things. How much time is left and what is the score? You do it with your eyes visually all the time because you're always looking for it. So that kind of kept me a little bit humbled to say, okay, we're a part of this, but we are not the stars. And it goes back to my point of who the stars really are. It's our kids. It's the kids that play this game and they come in and out. And I've seen great players in high school that went on and played college and went and played pro. And I can sit back in good memories for me and say, man, I called games they were at. And look, they're playing on Sundays now, or they're playing on Saturdays, and then they're playing on Sundays. I've got some other stories I'll talk about how I missed opportunities of knowing true talent just because of a particular game. I will tell you this one because I think it's kind of funny. I remember Sam Bradford, and you probably know who he is, Heisman Trophy winner, goes to the University of Oklahoma, and he played for Putnam City North. And he played one of our schools a lot. Now, this was before the video scruff. I was still doing radio. And the thing is, he came into town here in Lawton, and we did the ball game, and I think he threw 3 interceptions. He just had a bad night. And I'm thinking, I didn't say this on the air, thankfully. They could record it and bring it back to me as a nightmare. I said, what is OU thinking? I mean, we're owning this kid in high school. What is he going to do at the University of Oklahoma? Oh, yeah, win a Heisman Trophy, go to the NFL, have a little bit of a career there. So what do I know? And it really is the truth. What do you know by watching one game? You don't. Because even the best of them, and he was a great athlete in all of those sports, that you can have a bad night. And we see that today, even with the best of the best. They can just have an off night. And so he had an off night. And so I just kind of relished in the fact that, but he went on. And to have that touch, and I know other guys can say the same thing that have done this as long as I have and more and longer, is the fun and experience that you can relate to those good times. And so now we have it visually. I mean, just for those who are listening right now, and this is something that you're listening to, that's what you had to do. Growing up, that's what I loved. I lived in the truck of my dad's car to listen to Tigers baseball games, Ernie Harwell, to hear all of that stuff and really get enthralled of the broadcast, because you had to live on that. I remember the finals because I was in band camp, believe it or not, played an instrument. It was always the Lakers and the Celtics. And we didn't have a TV out in the sticks. We had a radio. And it was always down to game 7. It was always in the last moments, it was going to be Larry Bird or Magic Johnson for the win. And you kind of knew that. And you had to live in that moment. So living in those moments, having these moments like that, is why the Oklahoma Sports Network exists. So this first episode is just to get to know, and then we'll go further on from there. The stories that we'll tell, the interviews that we'll do. And yes, I'll take a little bit of a backstage to all this, but it was just me and a little bit of a podcast room. Oh, and I want to thank Cameron University for allowing us to have their podcast room so I can have that. Here in the CEDIS office, that's where our corporate office is. Got to say corporate, it sounds more. Our official headquarters, CEDIS office at Cameron University. Thank you so much for their sponsorship and our ability to be able to work together like this. So I think I've kept enough of your time, enough of your interest, so that maybe you'll come back to episode 2 for the point after. I'm so grateful that if you're a fan of ours, keep loving what we do because we love it, and tell others about what we do. Tell them it's easy to download. We're on all the social media platforms, and we're on Apple, Android, and all those Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. So we'll continue with podcasting because, yes, it's new for me. Maybe not new for all of you, but I had to jump on board because there was more and more people that weren't just really listening to other things outside of podcasts. They listen to podcasts all the time. So I said, well, why not us? So episode 1 in the books, the point after. Little play on words. If you know a little bit of sports analogy, and our point after all the sports is done, we're going to be here for you. The point after, right here on the Oklahoma Sports Network.